Hello everybody and welcome back into Cult Film Cafe with me, your host Jonathan. I am joined as always by my illustrious co-host Kenzie McLean.
Hello there.
And the guest on this week's pod is the man, the myth, the legend himself, David Green.
Yes, it's me.
So, yeah, if everybody is familiar with the pod, you know how this works. It's based on a 100 must-see cult film poster where we pick a film each week and we dive into it from a cult aspect using the 8 rules of Cult Film Cafe. Now, as you already know, if you are listeners to the podcast, the guest gets to pick what film we are going to be talking about this week. So I'll hand it over to David and he'll let you all know what film it's going to be.
Well, for this week I picked an amazing film, a film that everyone loves, let's be honest. We all love it. It's Princess Bride.
Grandfather's here.
Can't you tell me I'm sick? He'll pinch my cheek. I hate that.
Maybe he won't.
Hey, how was this sickie? Huh? I brought you a special present.
What is it?
It was the book my father used to read to me when I was sick, and I used to read it to your father. And today, I'm going to read it to you.
It was a time when life didn't seem so complicated.
Marriage is what brings us together today.
What?
What?
I'm killing myself once we reach the honeymoon suite.
Wouldn't that be nice,
A courtly age of gentle conversation.
I will always come for you.
But how can you be sure?
This is true love.
Oh, no. Is this a kissing book?
No, actually there was a lot of treachery, peril, and revenge.
Prepare to die.
Never go in against a Sicilian when death is on the line.
There were affairs of state.
But I've got my country's 500th anniversary to plan, my wedding to arrange, my wife to murder, and Gilda to frame for it. I'm swamped.
And affairs of the heart.
My Wesley will always come for me.
Your Wesley is dead.
I've seen worse.
Bye-bye, boys.
Have fun storming the castle.
It's more than turning.
What's the difference? We've got him.
Think it'll work?
It would take a miracle.
Bye-bye.
It's a story of love, a tale of adventure. It's as real as the feelings you feel.
They're kissing again.
Someday you may not mind so much.
The Princess Bride. Not just your basic, average, everyday, ordinary, run-of-the-mill, ho-hum fairy tale.
So, David, just a quick question I'd like to ask to get a bit more familiar with the guest. What made you choose that particular film out of the 100 on the list?
Honestly, I think it's just the most fun. It's just a good film. It's nice. It's popular enough for being a cult film, in my opinion, that, I don't know, I think it just works. Good film. I like it a lot.
So that's it, really? You just like it a lot?
Literally, yep, I just love it.
Fair.
That's fair.
Any particular reason why, though?
I just like it because it's not really, it's not a typical film, is it? It's a nice film. It's like a fairy tale book come to to film. It's my main reason, really. Everything else is kind of like your typical film. It's a bit fun. It doesn't take itself too seriously.
That's fair. It's nice to know why you picked that film. Now, we're going to quickly go into our thoughts on the film, which is generally good, the bad, the indifferent, and how we feel about it. It's just basically like a short mini review that we all give it, and then we'll give it a rating at the end of that. Now, I'll probably just hand over to Kenzie, and he can kick us off with his thoughts on the movie.
Well, Princess Bride. This is my first watch of the film. I have heard of it. Well, I had heard the name, which the name always put me off, but I had heard it was supposed to be a really good film. So I was like, I'll watch it, but I don't think it's going to be my cup of tea. And not to my surprise, it wasn't really my cup of tea. It's definitely an alright film. I agree with what David says. The film doesn't take itself too seriously, which is one thing I do quite like about it. But I don't know. See, I don't like. Sometimes films are just not for you, and I feel like that's just how I feel about this film. I did like how it started. I liked the kind of first act. I like how it kind of flowed. It went really well, but bar that, nothing fully stood out to me compared to like other films that are kind of like it. in a way, it's although being different from other films in its genre, I also find it kind of generic in the same sense, which is kind of weird. I don't know if that's just me though. Like I said, it's not really my type of film. Like, what do you feel about it, Jonathan? Do you feel the same, or like do you like it?
Um, it's one of those 80s films that has sort of passed me by in terms of films from the decade. I'm a big lover of 80s films in general, normally. A bit like you, I kind of thought that I would maybe like it a bit more, but it's just one of those films that for me is just not really my cup of tea in terms of films that I would go to and sort of select to watch. That's something that's going to be different for everybody, and these are obviously just opinions based on that. I mean, I don't particularly like this style and this genre of film. Like, I'm a big fan of Rob Reiner, though, the director of the movie. It's something that's quite weird. I do like his films, but I prefer films like This Is Spinal Tap, if I'm being totally honest with you. That to me is a far better film for me, because they are both similar in terms of their parody, sort of pastiche movies. This one, Princess Bride, being about like fairy tales and stuff like that, whereas This Is Spinal Tap sort of speaks to me more because it's a parody about a metal band, essentially a rock band, which is something that I find more interesting and probably more funny as well. But that's just my initial thoughts. But David, what about you?
Well, I think it's no surprise that I think it's a great film. I feel like it's almost something for everyone in it. Almost, if you like the genre anyway. I think it's just such a watchable film. It's just a good time. You stick it on, it's like an hour and a half of just kind of dumb stuff. It's not too serious. It's not too grindy, for lack of a better word I can't think of. I just really enjoy it. I feel like the acting's great, and the story, while being really simple, it's just fun. That's all I can really say about it. It's just a good time, and also it's very quotable. That's the one thing I quite like about it. You can just say anything about it, and people will probably know of it anyway from the quotes itself. I think that's a fun. That's a fun part of the film experience. Is after you watch it, people still reference it.
So, are you like a big fan of like the genre?
Kind of. I don't know. I like these kind of parody films. I like things like, like the kind of Naked Gun. Though I'd probably say this, it's more a homage sort of thing, pastiche sort of thing, rather than a proper parody, because it's not directly poking fun at it. It's more just like, I suppose it is at times, but it's almost like a direct translation. It's what you'd get, right, if films were probably about when storybooks were being written. Princess Bride is what it would look like, probably just more serious, right? I just like, I like the style. I like what it is. I like how it's just kind of fun. It's lighthearted. It's a good time. It's kind of swashbuckly,
Yeah, the director is clearly having fun with the film. I think it was a good way to go with this type of genre. Yeah, I completely agree. It's like, it isn't quite parody. It's not. It's like, it's more just having it's just really not taking itself too seriously, which I think works really well for these type of films. And I think this film pays off for, like, it really does pay off for the film, which is quite cool.
Yeah, obviously, Rob Reiner's known for, like, what I was saying about these pastiche sort of parody style. I'm not saying they are definite parodies, but obviously This Is Spinal Tap's very similar in a different way. But he's also worked on films that are across a lot of genres, but early on in his career it was comedy seemed to be the thing that he honed in on. Just having a quick look at stuff that he made sort of around the time. I mean, When Harry Met Sally was another thing that he directed, another film that he directed, and that's another film that is very comedic and very quotable as well, and it's very of the time for people of that age. I'm a bit surprised at myself about The Princess Bride not liking it as much. As we were just having a wee chat before we started recording, the writer of the screenplay was William Goldman, who wrote the novel Princess Bride, and I've had a look at his filmography in terms of screenwriting, and there's some big films on there that I'm a big fan of. ones that stand out to me. Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, Marathon Man, films like that, which I love, and they're sort of more my style of movies, obviously. But it's just, I sometimes gravitate towards people that I like in different aspects of filmmaking, and it's just a bit strange for me that this one just didn't quite click for whatever reason. And it's not that it's a terrible film, and it's not that it's badly made or anything like that. And I think a lot of the casting choices were right. It's just I don't think that I could relate to the film like some other people, and I think that's half the battle with films like this, is if you aren't into it and you don't relate to it that way, I think you're probably not going to enjoy it as much as people do. And I know people out there that'll put this in maybe their top 10 films of all time. It's just that loved universally by fans. But for me, obviously, it's something that isn't my cup of tea, so to speak. But there's nothing really bad in terms of flaws in it. It's a very well made film. I think the lack of sort of CGI is a big plus. I think that's why it still looks good today. There's not a lot of special effects. I think a lot of stuff was done practically in the film, which makes it look, doesn't age it as much as some 80s films can be aged by that, when you move forward digitally, which is something I picked up on it. How does anybody else feel about sort of some of the technical aspects of the film?
It's quite weird I don't think anything about this film really stands out for me. I think everything's done well enough, but I don't think it's done amazingly. Nothing about the filming of the film really stood out to me. Some of the kind of choreography, with the fencing parts, were pretty cool. That was one thing that I did think looked quite good. But overall, it looks fine. But I don't think it looks amazing. I don't know. And it's I feel. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, no,
no,
please.
I was only just going to say that the acting too, I don't think the acting stood out either. I think it was just kind of alright, but I think that works for this type of film. But yeah, sorry, what were you going to say?
Well, we're going to have a little tussle here, Kenzie, because I think the acting's great.
It's not really, though. It's fine.
For what it is, for delivering the dialogue, though, it's hammy, it's all the dialogue really is stupid. Let's be honest, everything about it is done, but the actors are able to portray the characters as if this is serious, as life or death for them. That's part of the reason I like the acting so much, because you've got you got Wallace Shaw playing Vicini, and he's sitting there saying inconceivable 9 times in a row when it doesn't apply for it, but all he seems, he believes it obviously, and it works. You've got Carrie Elwes talking about how he's mostly dead, and it's it's kind of sucky, but it seems very natural for her, which is part of the reason I like it so much. Technically, yeah, I actually don't disagree with either of you when it comes to technical aspects. It's all fine. It's nothing to write home about. I think it's well made, though I did like the rat costume in the swamps of fire. It's very fun.
I did like the rat costume too. Did look quite nice.
Wrestling a midget in a rat costume is great.
I like the quicksand as well. I don't know, I just the way they sunk into it.
Yeah, it was quite
cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's cool.
The way
I like that.
It didn't look unnatural. I think the quicksands, which I thought I was quite surprised by, because you look at more modern films. Look at Crystal Skull. They have a quicksand scene in that, and it looks a bit awkward. Really, it looks
classic
like
film.
Okay, let's not talk about classic film.
Okay.
Let's not.
I don't know. I think I think the quicksand's a little bit quick. I don't know. I know quicksand's meant it's got the name quicksand, but she just falls in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an Olympic dive. It's great.
Man dives into sand. But I guess I now looking back at it, some parts of the film was kind of winning me over a little bit, which is kind of interesting.
Well, it's just such an absurd. Part of the reason I probably like it so much, right, is it's this absurd comedy kind of thing, but everyone treats it like it's completely normal. Princess Buttercup, she's listing all these dangers, and it's we've got these the rats of unusual size, and the fire pits, and the lightning quicksand, and she falls straight through the quicksand. It's literally a hole in the ground, and he's diving in after. It's just so dumb, but everyone seems like it's a genuine fear. I like that a lot. It's like Naked Gun for me. I love that. It's so good.
I think if you're into those, like, I'm just going to touch on it again. I'm not a big fan of things like Naked Gun and Spaceballs and, all these sort of parody pastiche movies that riff on other ones. They aren't really for me, and I know that there's a big market out there for them and there's people that love them, but I just want to touch on, David, the casting for you and the acting. You think, in your opinion, is really one of the sort of standouts in this film, and you aren't wrong. I mean, I think all the actors play their characters really well, but it's just interesting to note that some of the people in the film weren't first choice, because a lot of times when you watch films like this and the acting's so good, you expect that those actors to be essentially the first choice for it. And just a couple of ones that I would like to pick up on is Wallace Shawn for Vicini. He was in the running, but also Danny DeVito was in the running for that role. And I think the basis on that was the contrast in height. There's a scene in the film right at the start when Buttercup rides through the forest and they're all standing in a line, and it's like incrementing up in height. Obviously Andre the Giant, over 7 foot, playing Fezzik. But that's also a funny one, because I thought, given the role in this, if you didn't read anything about it, I thought that he would definitely be the shoe-in number one choice for this, given the character in this film. But I think he was first choice, but they didn't. I think for a time they didn't think they could get him because he was a wrestler at the time, wrestling sort of regularly. And the second choice for Fezzik was Arnold Schwarzenegger. Which
I've watched that.
That's a weird one to think about when you think about Andre the Giant and then Arnold Schwarzenegger. Quite different in terms of even size and things like that. There was loads of tall people interested in the part, and I think they done right. So I'm reading here that Liam Neeson also auditioned for the part, and that'd have been a bit of a weird one. I don't think
I would love that,
but he wouldn't have been big enough. He's not imposing enough to play that character. I think they got it right. And like David said, they got a lot of the cast right and the casting right. Interestingly enough, in the end credits, it's introducing Robin Wright as Buttercup. I think she was only in one. She had one small part in a film before this, and so this was sort of her feature film debut, I suppose you could claim that. But even she wasn't first choice either. They had a slew of people looking to play that part, and there's quite a lot of people here: Uma Thurman, Meg Ryan, Sean Young. If you're not familiar with Sean Young, she was in Blade Runner. Susie Amos, Courtney Cox, Alexander Paul, and Whoopi Goldberg. Funnily enough, and it wasn't like Robin Wright wasn't cast until about a week before they started filming, which is quite tight in terms of getting one of your main characters cast. I think filmmaking back then might have
drop.
What was that?
I was asked, did someone drop out? Like, why was it so late?
I'm not unsure.
Not
I just don't know if they could
find
the right person for the role. I think when you're doing casting for films, especially films that are adaptations of novels, you're going to have fans of the novel that have got a very distinct vision of who should play parts. I think Cary Elwes works really well because right at the start, playing the sort of farmer boy, he's obviously a good-looking young man. He doesn't really have much substance then, and obviously this film jumps 5 years later, and then when we meet him again, he's this sort of rogue pirate, and he's obviously done a lot of growing up. But Cary Elwes does a real good job of being able to play both of those parts, and he does switch when he becomes this pirate. Is it Dead Man Roberts or
the Dread Pirate Roberts?
Dread Pirate Roberts. But yeah, and it's like he becomes a completely different person. I think his mannerisms change, his accent's a bit changed. I think the accent is a weird one for me. So obviously they're trying to be it British, and it can sometimes feel a bit weird.
Yeah,
It's such
I mean,
a go on.
What's the guy's the Dread Pirate guy? I forgot the actual guy's name.
Carrie
yeah,
Elwes.
Gary Elwes.
Carrie Elwes, yeah. When I watched like the first like 5 minutes of the film where it explains like the kind of first part of the film, I just didn't think he'd be very good in the film. Like I thought like the way he was acting in like the first part, I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna really like this guy. And then when he comes in it, he's completely changed, and he's so good. He's so good in the part. It works really well. Like he's just the way he talks. He was probably my favorite character in it. I just liked
He's quite
the way he
dry.
talked. Yeah, he's just dry and like just kind of nicely confident, and just every situation he just seems to not be bothered about anything. Like every situation he goes up against, he's like, oh, okay. He's just like, let's fight, or like when he has to beat the guy at wits and stuff like that, and he's, I don't know, he's just so good.
He's like Batman. He's always ready for something. He's got his iocane powder, and he can choke out a giant. He's got magic magic swordsmanship. He's just great at everything. It's great.
It's great. Sorry. He can even drink poison. Apparently, he's
really
growing an immunity. Oh my god, I can't believe that. I don't know how deadly that poison is, so I don't know if you could do that. But
it's from Australia. Remember?
It's from Australia. Does that mean it's weaker? Does that mean it's good?
That means it's stronger. I remember everything's designed to kill you in Australia.
Oh, that's a good point. Never thought about that.
That's how strong a man he is.
There is a lot of good things. The more we talk about it, the more we're understanding that this is actually not a terrible film. It's down to an opinion based on things that you like, things that you don't like. Now, based on that, I mean, there's a lot of really good stuff in it. One big thing for me, I'm always a sucker for good music in films. And I was quite surprised to see that it was Mark Knopfler of Dire Straits who composed the original soundtrack album for this film. But it doesn't surprise me when you hear some of the sort of score in it. But yeah, a really, really good film. And like you were talking about aging kids watching these type of films, again, we're going back to an age thing. I think in the late 80s, sort of mid to late 80s, there was a lot of these kind of fantasy fairy tale style films around. I mean, probably started with something like The Goonies, you had Willow, you had The Never Ending Story, you had this. Although they had kids in it, you could still watch them as adults and as kids. They were very good at hitting two demographics in terms of audience, which is always a good thing. Because it always opens your market up. But yeah, the film has got ridiculous rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Based on its Wikipedia page, it's currently got a 98% approval rating based on 80 reviews, which is absolutely massive in terms of how high that is. But
very well deserved.
Well,
that shouldn't be that high.
Well, we're going to get into that,
I'll find you, Kenzie.
We're going to get into that. Obviously, you can tell that David's a big lover of this movie. Kenzie's starting to, as the more he's thinking about it, maybe think that there is things he likes about it.
It's a thinking man's film, let's be honest.
There is some things that I love about the film. There's some things I don't quite like about the film. There's some things that are just a bit average about the film. So with that being said, we will go into now giving the film a rating out of 5 popcorn buckets. Now I'll probably hand it over to Kenzie first, and he can let you hear what he thinks about it based on that.
So when I was watching it, I was like pretty sure, I was like, I know where I'm going to give it. I think I was going to give it a 3, but as I watched it, and I was like, actually, I'm liking this more, and I was like, maybe it could even get to a 4. But you know how I feel about it, the first kind of act of the film was like really strong for me. I feel like the middle part of this film really lets it down. I just don't like all the kind of good parts of the film that I really liked, like the kind of the fight scenes, the witty kind of dialogue. I feel like it all kind of disappears in the kind of middle part of the film. It does eventually come back in the third part, but the second part I really lets this film down. But and then on top of the fact that I'm not a big fan of this genre anyway, but it did have me, so I'm probably gonna give it a 3.5 out of 5 popcorn buckets, and I think that's fair for me. It was quite an enjoyable film.
So over to you, David. What would you give this film out of 5 popcorn buckets?
I like the film a lot. I think it's great. I love the acting. I love the idea of it. The fact that it's like, fantasy book into film. I think I don't disagree actually with Kenzie. The second act a bit is that bit of downtime between that and like the castle thing, where it's a bit, it's fine, but it's not what the first and third act are. When it comes to rating, I like the film a lot. I'd give it a solid 4.5. I'd say.
So it's another strong rating there from a film from David. So it's just me that's left. Like I said, there's some really good points to this film. Music, big one. Soundtrack for me, really good. Cary Elwes' performance is really good. He does a lot in this. He does a lot of the heavy lifting for me in this film, Cary Elwes. I think if he wasn't quite right, I think this film could be not as enjoyable as it is. Like I say, a big fan of Rob Reiner in terms of a filmmaker. I'm also a big fan of William Goldman in terms of screenplays specifically. Not much of a reader, I'm a film guy. But yeah, all round, it's a really enjoyable, family-friendly film, which is something that's quite hard to say about, especially some of these films that we're going to go on to talk about, and some of the ones that we've already spoke about, which I suppose sort of gives it that edge in terms of if you're looking for something to sit down with your kids to watch in like a Sunday afternoon. It's I think it gets adults and kids as both. I think there's enough in the movie for it to be something that's enjoyable for the whole family. But yeah, based on that, I'm going to give this film 3.5 out of 5. It's not quite hitting the marks enough to get to a 4 for me. But yeah, it's a strong 3.5. So we're now going to move on to the second act of the podcast, which is the 8 rules of Cult Film Cafe. Now, if you don't know, we break down these films even further using the 8 rules of Cult Film Cafe. Now, just give you a rundown quickly on what the rules are if you're not familiar with them. They are low budget / box office flop, rewatchability, quotability amongst fan bases, elements of audience participation, not well received by contemporary critics or reviewers, explores controversial topics, subjects and themes, engage with a culture and community in some way, and it cannot claim to be a cult film from the get-go. Now, they're the 8 rules. Now that you know them, we're going to dive into The Princess Bride, and we'll start off with low budget / box office flop. Now, I'll hand that over to Kenzie and he can kick us off with this one.
So when I checked, I think the budget was around about 16 million? Yeah, 16 million US dollars for the film, which it's not too big. I don't know how much is that now.
Oh,
I don't know.
If you bear with me, I'll check that.
Right. I don't think it's like too high a budget. It's still like a decent sized budget.
I think it was modest at the time, right? That was quite okay.
Yeah, that was like
good,
an okay-ish budget. Like it's not like a
yeah.
And with the box office, I was trying to kind of look about that. I think it done well, does it not?
It was $30.8 million. So
initially a modest success. Modest.
Mm-hmm.
Everything about this film was modest. It's kind of funny. Modest. Yeah, grossing 30.8 million at the US and Canada box office on a 16. So that's like just under? No, wait. What?
Just under
16 million.
Times.
Just under 2 times.
So with 32 million. I just wanted to let you know that 16 million today is around is just over $40 million.
Oh,
it's like bigger than I thought. Oh, okay.
So the thing about that today, that sort of sits in the sort of middle ground of where we would look at budgets in terms of films. It's kind of like a weird grey area. There's not really many films that get made for that kind of budget these days.
Yeah, but it's not. It wasn't really. Now looking at it, it wasn't really a success. I mean, it's not even making double its budget, and then never mind like that's not including like things like marketing and stuff like that. So it wasn't really a success, even though it seems to get praised.
Yeah, that's the sort of flip side to this film, is it wasn't successful in terms of box office and and the money that it made, and I think that was due largely down to how the film was marketed. I just think it was one of these films that studios just didn't know how to market it properly to get it the big box office returns, and I think that's probably why it didn't hit enough money in terms of box office. But yeah, it's a massively critically acclaimed film in terms of that. It's always been up there and been held in high regard. Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert, they were sort of two of the bigger film critics of the time. Ebert wrote a very favourable review about it in his column in the Chicago Sun-Times. Richard Corliss of the Times said it was fun for the whole family. Yeah, it's been really praised. Janet Maslin in the New York Times. It's been a really sort of not necessarily critic acclaim, but I think critics liked it, and it was given favourable reviews at the time, which probably is the reason why it still sort of looked at today as in the light that it is.
It really only got its popularity after it was released to home video. I think it's when everyone kind of saw it because it was cheap, probably.
Yeah, I could see that. I feel like this film would probably do really good in reruns on channels and stuff like that as well.
Yeah,
it's kind of
go on a TV with the family sort of thing.
Yeah, it's like family viewing, isn't it? Like the film's it's perfect for that. It's absolutely. It's a film that children would enjoy, and it's a film that parents would enjoy too. It's got things for both people to like. So yeah, I could totally see that being the case. I don't know. I think a film like this is really hard to market for. The type of film it is. Like, if I saw that film advert, I mean, it's different now. I think back then maybe it would be easier to more people would be wanting to watch films like that. But I wouldn't have went to see it at the cinema. I don't know about yous. And maybe that was the same with a lot of other people, as they saw that and that's not the type of film I want to see at the cinema.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of interesting to think about.
Yeah, it's kind of when was 1987? So it's kind of like the back end of the whole kind of swashbuckling era, I suppose. I think kind of when they were dying a little bit film wise, so probably it wouldn't get in as many audiences, if you will, take films or to the cinema. Sorry.
So yeah, I think overall. Oh, sorry. You about to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the audience that went to see it, I mean, there was obviously enough people went to see it for it to gain the secondary market, and it's always one of those where if you're a massive fan of something that you go and watch, you'll probably say that to 30, 50 of your friends, whatever, and even if 10% go and buy the film, if everybody that loves the film does that, that's how it ends up getting its secondary market sort of bump in terms of that. Yeah, it wasn't a major box office success like we've said that so it's one of these things that it does tick that box for us here on the podcast. But you were touching on the sort of how it would do well in reruns on television, and I suppose that goes on to the next point of rewatchability. And I think this film, for most people, will be highly rewatchable, and there's a lot of factors to that. I think for me, factors of rewatchability, one big one for me is the running time of a film. I'm always a stickler for that. I think if a film's over 2 hours long, you really have to want to watch it for you to put it on. I think if a film's 90 minutes, I'm more inclined to just stick it on and watch it over and over again. Whereas when you're getting to the new films now, I mean, nobody really makes 90-minute movies anymore. That used to be the thing. Everything used to be around 90 minutes. This film, the same, it's just over 90 minutes runtime. And I think that's a big factor in rewatchability for me personally. I mean, a lot of the films that get made now, you're lucky if you get films that are shorter than 2 hours, or just under 2 hours, and some of those films just are a bit leggy if they aren't enjoyable and engrossing. But like, this film is a real easy watch as well, which obviously factors into the rewatchability of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't
It's very
realize.
simple.
Yeah, it's a kind of simple driven film. These films are the type of films that are really good for rewatching. Because a film that's got like a complicated story and stuff like that, yeah, they're good at times, but there's a time and a place. Whereas a film that's got a simple story that's just gonna, you've heard the kind of story before, and or you've even seen the film before, you're like, yeah, I could watch that again. Simple one for me. About 90-ish minutes. Yep, that's not too long. I'll watch that. Done. To be honest, the film did feel slight. I didn't realize the film was around about 90 minutes. It felt a bit longer for me, but I feel like maybe that's just 'cause I thought the kind of later half of the later kind of half of the film dragged a little bit, but maybe it's just down to the middle. I don't know, but yeah, it's a very easy film to watch. I would probably watch it again, and even me not being a fan of it, I'd probably, if it was on again at some point, I feel like I'd go, fuck it, I'll give it another watch. Why not? Because there were certain things I enjoyed about it. Even things like films like these are quite good because they don't even have to be that good for you to make you want to rewatch them again. They're just on, as long as they're like not bad. And you're like, they're short. So it's like, if something's shorter and it's not as good, it's fine because it's shorter. It's harder for like a film that's not, like, even if it's a film that's not really your cup of tea, you can still give it a watch. If it's a film that's long and it's not your cup of tea, you're gonna be like, nah, I don't see any point in that. Whereas it's shorter, you're like, stick it on, watch. That's good. How do you feel about it, David?
Well, I've watched it. Actually, I've not watched it that much. I've watched it about 3 times, including for this podcast, and I think I don't know, it's extremely rewatchable because obviously, as both of you said, it's not exactly very long. It's a very familiar story, which helps a lot. You know what's going to happen. It's low real commitment, isn't it? Like, you know, good guy's going to win, that sort of thing. So you can switch off. It's very much chewing gum for the eyeballs. Yeah. If you don't want to commit to the likes of Blade Runner 2049, where it's like a 3-hour film, you can just sit and like Princess Bride's it's light-hearted. It's a familiar story that everyone's already comfortable with, and it's well made. So yeah, there's nothing particularly taxing about watching it.
Yeah, it's a very easy watch. I think this one's very easy to give a tick for rewatchability. I feel like easily.
Yeah, like you both said about it. I mean, you've got good characters. I think that's another one as well. Good characters. It's not ridiculously long. The story's very familiar, and you don't have to think too much to understand sort of what's going on with the narrative, which is another good thing as well. So yeah, that's also a big one. So the next point up would be quotability amongst fan bases, but quotability in general. I don't know about yous, but there is certainly some big things in this that are easily said on repeat. And everybody will have their own quotes that they like from this. It could be anything really. I think that's what makes films cult and have more cult status, is how much of the dialogue is quotable. I think for people that have seen this a lot, I think a lot of the dialogue's going to be quotable, but for somebody like me who has genuinely only seen the movie sort of once, twice, I've seen it a couple of times, but once majorly watching it, and I'm just going to say it, my favourite quote of the film is, "My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die."
Hello. My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. Hello! My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die.
Yeah.
That's very respectable.
It's the only quote I know of the film, and for me, not a lot of the other dialogue. I mean, it's the first watch, but maybe on a second watch, some more of the dialogue will fully stand out to me. But that part, it really stands out. Also, I knew about the quote before. It's one of those weird ones where I knew about the quote but didn't know what film it was from. So I was like, what is this film? I sometimes I've even had it, like, at times I had it stuck in my head at one point, and I'm like, yo, I don't even know what that's actually from. It's a very good quote though, and it's said, it's repeated, it becomes easy to quote because of how many times it gets repeated in the film, and that final kind of part of the film where he says it when he's actually fighting the man who killed his father. It's just a really strong scene, and he just keeps on repeating it just as he said he would. It's just brilliant, and it just becomes that easy quote to like get memorized in your head. It just sticks.
It's quite emotional as well, with the whole, like, you know, it's his dad. Like, he's finally getting his vengeance sort of thing when he thought he was about to lose it all.
Sorry.
The best quote, let's be honest, fellas, is the Vicini one. Like at the end of the battle, where it's like, "You've fallen victim to one of the classic blunders." First is what's it called? The first is never get involved in a land war in Asia, but only slightly lesser known. Never go against a Sicilian when death is on the line, and they just die.
Yeah,
it's just so good.
That's also
a
quote. Inconceivable is quotes are quite funny. Vicini says that a lot in the first half of the film, and yeah, as a quotable line, as a line of dialogue. I think that's one thing that I noticed doing a bit of research on it, and hearing the actors say how much of a sort of a time they had with people sort of saying lines back to them. I think Cary Elwes has said that he still gets people saying Princess Bride lies to him now when he sees them walking about. But he was saying about Wallace Shawn had it the worst really because of that inconceivable. And he was saying that any time people seen him to like drop keys or anything, that's exactly what they would say. Inconceivable. And I think over time that might become annoying for you, but it's just fans paying homage to a film that they love, so it shouldn't really be. There's probably so many quotes. I don't know about quotes, and I'm trying to think of what the dialogue is. Do you know when they're sword fighting, and before Cary Elwes' character gets to the top, Inigo Montoya says to Vicini, "I'm going to fight him left-handed," and stuff. But it's in the middle of the fight. I don't exactly know what the dialogue is. I don't know if it's I'm keeping something from you. It's something like that. I'm actually right-handed, and switches, and obviously it gets the upper hand again, and then eventually that happens again with Cary Elwes. Oh, I've been keeping something from you. I'm not actually left-handed either, and then it goes to the full. Yeah, I just like wee things like that. There is a lot of quotable lines. Everybody will have their favourites. It's going to be massive for everything. There's some other ones from Inigo. Fezzik, you finally did something right. It's a good one.
I like Fezzik, he's nice.
Doesn't have a lot of lines in the film though.
No, the ones he has though I feel are quite good. When they're just kind of like they're very simple. It's like he's had a hard day. He's been mostly dead all day. Leave him alone. And he's like, oh yeah, I'm sorry. This is quite. They're very simple lines, but they're quite nice for like, he's such a big character, and you associate big and all that with violence, and actually he's just a big softie. He's just nice.
I really like Andre. I was nice seeing Andre the Giant because I really like Andre the Giant. But one of my favourite parts was when he tells him to jog the guy's memory, he just bonks him on the head and he just falls over. He's like, oh, I think I jogged his memory too hard.
Yeah. I mean, we've just rattled off a few, but yeah, big ultra fans of this film are going to have a field day with these.
It's very quotable.
Very quotable. 100%. Now that's another big one for the film in terms of the rules here at the Cult Film Cafe. Now the next one up, we have elements of audience participation. Now this can be a funny one, and if you have listened to the first episode about the Warriors, you have an understanding of what we mean by this, and it's audience. Die-hard audience or fans of the film sort of participating in any participatory aspect that you could think of. And that can come in different forms. I think the big one for me would be this, The Princess Bride has had a fan, I'm pretty sure there's a fan-made movie on YouTube, which is, I would maybe class that in here. It's one of those things. And it had a reworking, I think, for the 30th anniversary. Ivan Reitman, and there was actors playing different parts. And I know that they were actors, but they're obviously actors that are fans of the film. So it does have a life in this category. Whether it's a super strong one, I'm not so sure. But it does definitely have elements in it where the audience has sort of participated. I think fan-made films are a big part of this as well for me.
So is it like a fan-made film of like the entire, just kind of like a kind of retelling of the film?
I thought it was like they all like a read through sort of thing.
Is it like a read? Okay.
Like Community did during the thing.
Well, that was the sort of, that was Jason Reitman, sorry, done a live dramatic reading, and it had different actors playing the characters. Yeah, so that was something that was done. I
know it was I heard about this ages ago. There's like a bar named after, you know how like right at the start when it's like "As you wish, really meant I love you" sort of thing. It was like a bar opened up somewhere where it's called As You Wish, and it's got like Princess Bride themed drinks and all that.
Yeah,
I think that's really cool. I don't know where it is. I it exists
Chicago.
Somewhere. Oh wait, really? I don't think I'd be in Chicago.
Yeah, Chicago, and it's got 16 themed cocktails.
That's quite cool.
But it's just according to what I'm reading here. But yeah, that is quite cool. I mean, there is all of these sort of elements as well. There's a celebrity. There you go. Watch the celebrity fan-filled film version of The Princess Bride. So A-list actors worked secretly in quarantine to create a rough-hewn homemade version of the classic film, and it raised $1 million for charity.
Whoa!
So yes.
That's quite impressive.
But it is pretty cool, some of the stills, and it's just these people. So Keegan-Michael Key was in it, Patton Oswalt.
A lot of big names.
Just some of the people. That could be MPH, I think there. It's just trying to catch him. He's in a weird pose. Yeah, that looks like Sarah Paulson, famous for being in American Horror Story. Yeah, there was a lot of there is a lot of this that's going on. But yeah, that looks quite interesting, I think this is one of these films that is not only popular amongst audience, but actual people in the movie industry as well.
So it's definitely got big audience participation. Let's be honest.
Well, yeah, I mean, Hugh Jackman was in it. I'm just looking at some of the other people that he was in it.
Hugh Jackman. That's kind of sick. Not gonna lie.
I guess it kind of does have audience participation. I feel like I'm kind of half on with this one. But I guess
I didn't think there'd be as much.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised about what there kind of is.
There's like an episode of like The Big Bang Theory, where like the Inigo Montoya thing. It's like brought up perpetually. I'm pretty sure, because they're like doing like fencing classes, and they both want to take turns playing like Inigo Montoya or something like that. It's really dumb because they're doing like the accent and everything. They're saying like I am Inigo Montoya. It's like I don't know. It's weird how it just puts itself into stuff, you know?
My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die.
My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die.
The next one is not well received by critics and reviewers at the time. That's one where that's complete opposite for this film. It's always been well received in that regard from critics and reviewers. So yeah, based on what we know and stuff about the sort of ratings for it, I think this has got a 8.0 on IMDb. That's one thing I know.
That's high.
That's quite high.
Eights are. I mean, if you're in the eights, you've got a chance to crack the sort of top. Is it 250 in IMDb? I think it is. That's quite high. Obviously, you think about a lot of the how many films exist. So yeah, this is great. So The Princess Bride currently on Rotten Tomatoes has got a 97% tomato meter and a 94% audience score. So yeah, I mean, we cannot say that it's not been well received at all.
Complete
It's
opposite.
a complete opposite for this one.
It's a really easy one. Even though it wasn't like wasn't really a successful film at the time. It seems to be it's always been liked, and even now still liked. And some of the ratings are super high for the film. So
I mean, it's still getting for it to remain that high. It's still getting rated very highly now. I mean, you would think over time things would dip, but yeah, it doesn't seem to be that way for The Princess Bride. I'm just reading here another reviewer that was done by Peter Bradshaw for The Guardian in October 2017. He gave it 5 stars. So yeah,
5 stars.
5 stars in 2017. So that was 30. So that was 30 years on. So 87. So 30 years later. So still, I mean, The Guardian's.
It's a consistent thing.
Yep.
Excellent. Great.
But David's happy about that. Yeah, we don't really have much more that we can dive into. I mean, there's only so many sort of metrics that you can look at when looking at reviews and stuff for the film. Metacritic, they're a bit more harsh, I would terms. So it's currently got 77 out of 100 in terms of the Metascore, and 8.3 is an audience score. Still very high though. I mean, Rotten Tomatoes is probably the one that most people look at.
Has Metacritic always been kind of like a little bit harsher than like the rest of the reviews? I always see that Metacritic seems to have a slightly lower.
Oh, definitely. I would say they rate a lot of different things. Like, I think you can get video games rated and stuff like that. Like, you get ratings for that stuff. So it's not just films, which maybe makes a score. Yeah, it does seem a lot harsher. Yeah, so on Metacritic and on Cinema Score, which the audiences survey, with Cinema Score, they grade their films based on an A to F rating, and the grade that The Princess Bride got was A+. So yeah,
Ooh,
I mean,
excellent.
and you just got to look at the legacy in terms of the list that it's on. You know, like I said at the start, I mean, it's number 50 on Bravo's 100 Funniest Movies, 88 on the AFI's 100 Years, 100 Passions list of 100 greatest film love stories. It's 46 in Channel 4's 50 greatest comedy films. And in 2006, just to round off this, saying that it's been received across the board, in 2016, the film was inducted by the Library of Congress for Preservation in the United States National Film Registry, being deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. So yeah, a big plaudits there for the film and that one. An easy tick for us here at the podcast. This is where we're maybe going to have a couple of crosses against it. It's like not well received by critics and reviewers at the time. That's obviously not true. It's the reverse. It's the opposite of that. Explores controversial topics, subjects and themes. This film is essentially a fairy tale love story. It's not really a controversial. It's basically
very lighthearted.
It's very lighthearted. It's basically the story of good versus evil, and good wins.
That's all.
Perfect.
That's all it needs to be. Doesn't need to be anything harsh.
They do have a guy in a rat costume though, which is a bit weird.
The rat. I like the rat costume. Why'd you keep on dissing the rat costume?
Because it's a guy wrestling like a midget in a rat costume, and they set him on fire. It's a little bit unethical.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know if he was in the costume for the whole time.
They've got to be to keep it, you know.
They've probably had a dummy
to keep it realistic.
Could it not have been a puppet?
No. You see the way that moves? That had to be. That was a person.
Do you know for a fact that it was a
the
person?
Size. I'm sure it was a person. Hang on. I'll prove it right now.
I'm not too sure.
Rat costume.
The world
he
of
stabs
Google
it like 3 times.
Here, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, it was 50 pounds of latex, fake foreign rubber, and there were people in them. Apparently.
No, there you go. David's just cleared that up. There was people
terrible.
inside the giant rat costumes in The Princess Bride. Not relevant to explore controversial topics, subjects, and themes.
It's controversial because they're, I don't know, in rat costumes.
Right. I get what you're. I can understand why you want to bring that up in this part. This is more about the subject matter and topics
the actual
in
theme,
the film, not maybe some of the controversies to do with the production of the film. And if you want to touch on that, that's totally fine. But we're here to speak about the film, not the making of the film. That could be a separate podcast. You could set that up, David. You could do your own podcast series
an ethics committee.
You just do the same film that we do every week, but you do the making of, and then
very unethical.
I don't know.
I mean, it's fairy tale. There's no real controversy.
Right. So that was an easy one there. So we're on to engage with a culture or community in some way. Now, that is something that we touched on about elements of audience participation. Could probably go hand in hand with this one. It obviously has reached out to a culture or community in terms of creating its own culture for this film. And that's very prevalent with fan-made movies, and specifically the actors redoing it. That was a big one for me. There's obviously something about this film that just won't go away, and within pop culture. I was reading somebody's sort of quick, sort of short review of it, and the headline for our blog or whatever it was the movie that won the internet. Which is quite interesting. I mean, there's probably a lot of films that win the internet, but this is probably one of them. Yeah, it is an easy one as well for me, really, talking about that, engaging with a culture or community. The films that do that really bring people together is something that's it's quite fascinating to see.
At first, thinking about it, I didn't think it really did, but of course it did, because the fan films and all that. Yeah, it must have. It's created a community that all love this film, and they all love it dear. Pretty much, if you speak to anyone who's a fan of this film, they love the film. It's not just it's a good film. It's a really good film. They really enjoy it. So yeah, I guess this one is another one that's going to be a tick.
Yeah, David, you getting to add to this one, or?
No, you're all right. Especially what Kenzie says. I'm a fan of this film. I don't just really like it. I like it.
Oh, you like it a lot. Yeah, this is an easy one for it. And we're going to wrap up the 8 rules with the final part, the final one of them, which is it can't claim to be a cult movie from the get-go. And yeah, I don't think this ever was either.
Nah.
It's one of those things, it was a novel written by William Goldman, and just reading more and more about this, it was a film that people have been trying to get made, pretty much from day one. You get these films that have got fans straight away, and there's a couple of films from different eras, a few. So Fight Club, it was the last episode in the podcast. It basically, the book came out 3 years before the film got released. And I think people were scrambling to buy the rights to the book straight away. The Godfather is another one. It was 2 or 3 years, I think, between novel coming out, film coming out. That was a really popular novel as well, critically acclaimed novel. And then Dune is the other one. That just, I know how it had troubles getting a production off the ground, a bit like this. I mean, there's obviously loads of fans of the book, similar to this. There's obviously loads of fans of the William Goldman novel, which, yeah, it seemed as if it was always destined for a film adaptation. But it took the book came out and published 1973, so it took 14 years to get a theatrical version. Seems quite a lot of time, a long time for a film, or especially a piece of text that people obviously loved.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like if this director didn't do this film, I feel like this book might have never really got an adaptation, as it was. I don't know.
It was like a perfect storm sort of thing, where all the right people came together at the same time. Without everyone involved, it wouldn't be what it is today.
Yeah, I really feel like if it was left any longer, I really feel like the book would. Well, I don't know the book itself, but the chance of it getting made into a film would have been like lost to time. And I think it didn't have much time left for it possibly getting it, and just luckily the director was like, I want to do this, and managed to get it done. So, and now it's here to stay. It's still now. The film's hugely popular.
Massively popular, but yeah, it's one of those things that I think it was just, people were just trying to adapt it in a way, and it seemed as if it was just handed from studio to studio, or like production team to production team. I mean, a couple of things in terms of adaptations of it, just quickly to round out this section, is Ray Harryhausen was approached by British producer Milton Subotsky, who had written a script based on the novel. Harryhausen, fan of the book, like many, but found too many problems with the screenplay. They tried to work together in an attempt to create a new script and eventually gave up. It was just weird. What's so complicated about it? I mean, I've not read the book, and I don't think any of you have, so it would be quite interesting, and maybe it's something I should reach out to and see if anybody's read the book. It's maybe something that I'd quite like to get to the bottom of it, because there's some of these things where I hear complicated productions and trying to get films made, and it makes sense. So obviously I just touched upon Dune having issues, but I can understand why with that book, why it was so difficult. But a fairy tale, why was it so difficult, considering fairy tales have been made for years and it's such an easy story?
I think part of the problem, from what I know about the book presents itself like it's like an abridged version of a larger story. Is like the whole thing. It's like the best bits or something, or whatever it's called. So maybe it's like there was like changed bits of the pacing or something like that in like the development. Meanwhile, this one became, well, it was more of just a direct, from what I've read of the book, which is very little to be fair, but by the looks of it, this film's basically just like a direct to video version, if you get me.
So I'm guessing, did the book not take itself very seriously either?
No, it was kind of it's a parody.
I feel like that's a hard thing to kind of transfer to movie as well. I think they might have struggled with stuff like that, trying to get the kind of somewhat comedic aspects and stuff like that. Apparently the screenplay for us is really good. Apparently I've heard. I've never read it. I've just heard it. It's a good screenplay to check out.
Everything about it's great. Let's be honest. The acting's great, the film's great, the book's great. So are we really surprised? Let's be honest.
Right, everybody, so that's us wrapped up the 8 rules there, with a lot of the rules there being applied and ticked off for The Princess Bride. Yeah, it's easy to see why it's a much loved film. So we're now just going to move on to the next act of the podcast, where we discuss, based on the discussion we just had, breaking down the 8 rules, whether the film meets enough of the criteria to be considered a cult film in our opinions. Now, I will let Kenzie lead off with this one.
Okay. Well, yeah, even though this is it's quite good. So we went from our first film we done hit all our rules. Second one, I think, was one that missed. This one missed 2. Like this, yeah. It was 6 out of 8. Yep. But it's even still, I easily can see this as a cult film, and it's a very strong one. Kind of like, I feel like Fight Club in a way. It's got a very dedicated fan base that's quite big, and yeah. So I don't even know how much else I can really say about this. This one's, it's quite good. We've done 3 different films, and they're completely different in every way, and it's really interesting to see how they've got cult status and the fan base that they have and how they treat the films compared to each other. I think it's really interesting. I feel this one's more and kind of relates a little bit more to The Warriors than Fight Club with its kind of cult fan base, but yeah, this film easily I would see it as a cult film.
What about yourself, David?
Honestly, before I got into this whole thing, I never thought it was a cult film, but now that I actually research it, I looked at it a bit before watching this, and I was like, oh, I didn't actually realize, it was so not unpopular, but ambivalent towards when it first came out. So it's got it has the staples of a cult film anyway. With it's referenced quite a bit. It's got its very dedicated community. I definitely think it's a cult film. I love it. It's very cool.
Yeah, this is also an easy one for me, based on the sort of rules of the podcast. Like Kenzie touched upon, but we are sort of not just giving ticks to all of these points on the podcast. We're obviously breaking it down and fairly giving it ticks where it should apply. But at 6 out of 8, I think a lot of the sort of big hitters in terms of what makes films get cult status is they were big ticks for the film, and I think that's why it is easy to see why this film is still culturally impactful today. And that we're 35 years on this year from the film's release, and people are still talking about it, and people are still going to continue to talk about it, continue to watch it repeatedly. People are going to have it in the highest regards. It's probably going to be in some people's top 10 films of all time, maybe some people's top 5. Just a wee tip, but I was talking to my brother-in-law yesterday about it, saying that we were doing a Princess Bride in the podcast, and he was saying that one of his friends say it's a top 3 movie for him. I think that just goes to show that this film has a lot of fans, and there's a lot of love for it out there. And yeah, based on the discussion that we just had, it's easy to see why the film has gained this cult status and has went on to become not only a cult film, but a cult classic is probably what it would be described as now. Very much like Fight Club in the last episode. Yeah, it's a cult classic in terms of this. It's very recognisable now, especially now that we're familiar with it. It's probably going to be something that we'll remember, and when people talk about it, we'll be able to think back to this podcast and what we were talking about, and we'll have a lot to say on the matter, which is just one reason why it's good to do this podcast and break these films down.
The only thing I don't know if I'd see this film as a cult classic. That's the only thing I would say about it, but I think it's almost there. But I'd still probably just see it as a cult film in itself.
Almost there. Okay, buddy.
I don't know. What do you think, David? Do you think you say cult film or cult classic?
Cult classic.
Okay, all right.
Definitely. Come on.
That's very fair. But are we going to move on next to where we'd put it in our top 100?
So the final point, the final talking point, and the final part of the podcast is now that we have given you our opinions of the film based on a review, where we would put it in terms of how we would rate the film out of 5. We broke it down from the sort of cult rules that we have here on the podcast. We've now spoke about it to make sure it definitely is considered a cult film. We're now what we do is we consider where it would be placed in the top 100 is what we are now doing on a podcast. So we've done that for the last couple. So, I mean, you think about top 100 films, where would you place this if you were have to put it in sort of, it doesn't have to be a dead number, it can be in a ballpark area. But yeah, I mean, think about your experience with films and cult films in general. Where would this rank in the top 100 for ourselves? And this is basically a really subjective viewpoint. It's our opinions. We're going to have a very wide range of outcomes here, but I'll let David kick this one off because he's the one on the podcast that picked the film, and he's the one that's the biggest fan, I would say, out of the three of us. So it'd be interesting to see where he would place it in the top 100.
Okay, if we're doing top 100, to be as, I think, honestly, I wouldn't put it, 10 or lower. I feel that's a bit, as much as I like the film, I don't think it has that much, if you get me. I'd probably put it 20. I'd probably put it in 20 to 14, in my opinion. I don't know. I feel that's the best. In terms of looking at other cult films and all that sort of thing, I feel that gives it the most. I think it's pretty big. It's a great film. I love it a lot. But I think 20 to 14 is the best range for it for me. Anyway, on that list.
That's quite
So
low.
inside the top 20 for David
Yeah.
there. It's a respectable place to put it. I think there's going to be other people that'll maybe have it higher. So I think that's really fair. So Kenzie, what about yourself?
Now, this film is definitely a cult film. But I don't know. I don't know if I see it as a top 100 must-see cult film. This is what I was thinking about when I was watching it, and just after I finished it as well. Is because this is my favorite part of the podcast when I try and put it in the list somewhere. And yeah, at first I was like, I don't see it really being a must-see at all. But there's 100. You got to put 100 films in this list. That's a lot of films. It's a lot of cult films. And from the ones we're gonna get through, I think there'll be ones that definitely will never be seen on the must see. So I feel like I'm being a bit harsh. So I am going to include this on the top 100 must see, because I think I'm just being unfair in it because it's not my type of film. There's clearly people who love the film, so it is probably one of the ones that you should definitely probably check out and see if you like it or not. Because even I wasn't a big fan of the film, I still enjoyed it. So I'm going to stick it quite high. I'm going to probably stick it, and this is quite high. I'm going to put it in the 90s. That's very high, but and that'll probably in time that might come down. We'll see when as we get through other films. But at the moment, for me, I don't see it as a fully must see, but that's me being me. So I'm going to put it at 95 at the moment. I almost put it at 100, but I think I'm being really harsh there. I'll put it at 95. I'll put it at 95. I think, like I said, as we get through this, I think I'll probably move that. But as I feel for it right now, I just don't see it as a must see.
Well, so there's a big wide range between David and Kenzie there. So I think it's only right that I give my opinion on where I would put it in terms of 100 must-see cult films. It definitely makes the list, 100%. It should make everybody's list, in my opinion. Even if I'm not the biggest fan of the film, I think it definitely should be a film. If you're looking for cult films to watch, it should definitely be on your radar of films to watch. Now, I would put this personally for me, this is a top 50 for me. So it would probably sit somewhere 40 to 50 at this moment in time. But like Kenzie said, that subject to change as the further we get into the podcast. We'll sort of have a more rounded out view of where things are going to sit. I don't ever want to give anything something in the top 10 until I've sort of seen more and spoke about more of the films and where sort of films that I like. But I think that's really strong for me, considering it's not necessarily my type of film. But I definitely the thing about it, this is where I flip flop, because it's not my type of film in terms of it's not something I would look at and go, I really want to watch that. But for solely looking at cult films, then that's where it does shift to becoming quite a strong option in that category, based on just how culturally impactful the film has been for the past 35 years. And it's a film that people love. I doubt it's a film that people hate. There's maybe some people that do hate it. I don't hate it. I think it's got its charm, and it's a good, solid piece of movie making. And yeah, I think the film is massively worth a watch if you're looking to get into cult films. It might be one of the easiest ones to go into in terms of cult films as well, just based on the subject matter and stuff like that, because some of the cult films out there are really, really strange and really quite difficult to watch, and we can maybe not be for everybody. So if you're looking for a way into the cult films, this is definitely an easy entry point as well. So yeah, it's just it's got a lot of charm. That's what I can say about it. And there's a lot of cult aspects about it. There's a lot of these good things about it. You know, the rewatchability factor, quotability is a big one. Yeah, massive cult status there for the film. Like we said, it's a cult classic for me and David. And Kenzie still believes it's a cult film, although he's not got it super high. He still does believe that you should go out and watch the film.
Yeah.
So that's all we have time for here on Cult Film Cafe this week. It's been an absolute pleasure having David on to break down The Princess Bride. And don't forget that you can get in contact with the podcast, finding us on Instagram at Cult Film Cafe and via email by emailing thecultfilmpodcast@gmail.com. And if you'd like to get in contact with myself directly, you can find me on Instagram at 081331productions. And if you'd like to get in contact with Kenzie directly, you can find him on Instagram at
Doge_dogs. And if you've got any interest in gaming, you can follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/CronosStepman if you're a bit of a gamer. I know I am.
Yeah, so if you're interested in gaming and you like checking out Twitch, give Kenzie's stream a watch whenever he's live. And if you would like to get in contact with David, you can find him where, David? Tell people where they can find you in your amazing, wonderful world.
Well, the main thing I probably use is Twitter. You can find me at PhotosDGJ. So if you're looking to do anything, talk to me there.
That's David, so you can check him out. And don't forget, I'll drop everybody's links in the description on Spotify and all that good stuff, and YouTube when it goes up there. So you can check everyone out and see what they're getting up to and see all that good stuff. And don't forget to get in contact with the show. And if you would like to be a guest on the show, hit us up. Either email us or send us a follow on Instagram. Send us a DM, we can have a chat. We're always looking to get guests on every week. It's something, it would be great to see if anybody would like to join us on it. And it's been great talking about films with you as always. I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for listening. Podcast out. And we're done.